we as human beings see meaning. We see meaning first, and then we apply to it. We don't see the thing and then apply the meaning. We see the meaning. A little child learns that a doorknob turns a door and it opens, and that becomes instilled in us as the way to get through a door. And that's why it's very easy for the transmissions to be sent to our limbs for a healthy human being to open and close a door. We see meaning in things before we see the object. It's really kind of just the opposite of what has often been believed, is, well, no, we have to project meaning. No, we don't project meanings onto it. We see meanings. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second edition of our video, The Catholic Skeptic. All right. Hopefully, if you have not seen the first one, you will take the time to go back and look at that, because I'm not going to go into too much of a review. But I am the Catholic Skeptic, and again, that's a strange term. Again, I use the word skeptic. I'm going to quote one more time the definition from the American Heritage Dictionary, why I call myself a skeptic. A skeptic is the first definition in the American Heritage Dictionary of the English language is one who instinctively or habitually doubts, questions, or disagrees with assertions or generally accepted conclusions. And as I said in the last video, that kind of explains my personality, my way of thinking, the way I look at the world and life. I examine things, I question things, I investigate things, and that's why I consider myself a skeptic. Someone in the comment had made the point in responding to my question about, can you be a skeptic and not an atheist? Well, of course, because a skeptic is they said is general, whereas an atheist is a specific thing, and I totally agree with that comment. But many skeptics might not. People who consider themselves skeptics. Again, for example, Skeptic Magazine, a magazine I devour every time it comes out, published by Michael Shermer, a great magazine. But virtually every article I've ever read in there by anybody, they're 99.9% atheists and agnostics. And so that's why I brought that question up. But I'm the Catholic skeptic. So I'm a skeptic who's come to believe in God, and who holds that position a little more clearly. And so I want to take some time to talk about that. Just talk about Catholic. This is going to take more than one video to discuss why I believe specifically. Not only do I believe in God, but I do believe in the Christian understanding of God. I do believe God has revealed himself in Christ. That's not one video. That's going to be long. Right now, I just want to talk about just theistic understanding versus atheistic. Why do I believe in God in the first place? And why do I think that that's a reasonable and rational and logical conclusion to come to? Obviously, as I shared in the last video, there's no direct empirical evidence that I can present. There are things that I believe are indicators of that, but not direct empirical evidence. And I believe knowledge is not just determined by empiricism. I believe knowledge is determined by many, many things. And but I'm going to endeavor just in this video to talk about a theistic worldview and how that happens. And first thing to do that is the best way is to just take you on my personal journey with me, intellectual journey, so to speak, on this topic. Christians and other religions as well, but because of my own experience with Christianity, I'm going to focus on that. Christians have debated atheists for a long time, and you watch even on YouTube, you can find tons of debates between theistic and atheistic people, and most of the time, occasionally you have a few. I've seen a few Jewish individuals and some Muslim individuals do it, but for the most part, you see so many Christians doing it, and one of the things that I know, the late, great Christopher Hitchens, whom ironically I'm a fan of, in spite of the fact he's an atheist, I just thought Christopher Hitchens was amazing. And, one of the things that I remember hearing him say in a debate once he was doing, where he told the individuals debating, he says, look, you haven't even studied the other side of this issue, have you? Because the person was just kind of hostile and so certain, and, it just seemed appalled that he was an atheist. And sometimes believers are that way. They get very, very antsy about that. And that's an important principle, what he said. They haven't studied the other side. When I began to look into these things more deeply, a lot of Christians, Christians will do is they will look at apologetics. They'll look at various forms of apologetics and look at other people's arguments and spend all of their time reading Christian arguments against something rather than actually looking at the arguments. I didn't do that. I plunged into the deep end of the atheistic ideological swimming pool, if you will. I was, I looked at, I read books, I listened to Kant lectures, and, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, anybody I could find. I listened to the arguments, and I went down the rabbit hole of it for a while. I did experience it in that manner, where I was really in it, and I did go through a period of time of immense doubt. The arguments were good. The arguments were not simple or oversimplified arguments that many believers think that atheist arguments were. And so I went through a long bout where I would have probably kind of classified myself as, I would call a non-Gnostic. All right. Now, if you watch the last video, you understand an agnostic in its classical definition isn't simply someone who doesn't know if there's a God, but it's someone who believes you can't know, that there's some sort of a ceiling you can't pass as far as ever knowing this. I deny that vehemently. I don't believe there's something we can't know. I think if we want to know something, we can search it out. But I did go through a period where I didn't know, where I kept it to myself. It was secretive, but inside of me, I was doubting like crazy. And I just plunged deeper down in the hole and researched more. And came up with some responses. And so I'm going to talk about some of the things that I have, some ideas that I have concerning why I am not an atheist and why I have come up with, where I came to my own view. And as I said, the what you believe or don't believe about God affects your worldview. Some atheists will, again, take issue with that. Oh, you're just atheist means I just don't believe. It's unbelief in God doesn't have anything to do with it. But the truth is, it does affect our worldview. It affects how we look at life very, very predominantly. And mainly is because you take anything you believe to its fullest conclusion. Go all the way. I have a good friend of mine who's an atheist, a nice guy, great guy. But, as I talk to him, he'll always every once in a while say, I'm an atheist. He also believes in astrology. He's very much of times a believer in ghosts, reincarnation. He's afraid of Ouija boards. I mean, he has a lot of characteristics that you would not find normally in an atheist. And I just think it's because maybe it wasn't as well thought out. I don't know. But I mean, it always shocks me when he does that. I'm like, well, I'm surprised that you have such a, and he will even tell you he has a great interest in religion, despite the fact he doesn't believe in it. But, but by and large, to truly be an atheist, you are a materialist. An atheist would take the position of a materialist. You would hold, I don't think that's a wrong assertion. Of course, any atheist watching the comments, you can tell you if I'm wrong on that, but a materialist, you believe that everything is material, all right? The universe, the planet, the atmosphere, everything on the planet, each of us. We're material beings exclusively. We are the random byproducts of time and chance, acting on matter in a long, slow, blind mechanical process taking place over millions of years. That's what we all are. That's what all around us is if we hold an atheistic position. And I think that's something we have to settle into, if that's the belief system that any of us takes. That's what I would have to believe I am. All right. This process is a long process. So consequently, if I am the random byproduct of time and chance acting on matter, if that is what I am, if that's what my existence means, then all of my thoughts, my views, my morals, my ethics, my perspective, everything about me, all of those things, all of my thought processes are merely and exclusively the neurotransmitters firing in my brain, which are chemical reactions, and my perceptions, my understanding of the world, my thought process is in communication with other people who are having different chemical reactions in their brain. That's what our thoughts are. That's what our values are. In other words, a genuinely honest atheistic position, very much like that maybe of Jean-Paul Sartre, there's no meaning to anything. There's no objective meaning to life other than what I might assign to it. We come into existence, we have consciousness. That's a big mystery we can't cross, according to the scientists. Why is there consciousness? It always gets a bafflement from a debate. We're there for a while, then that consciousness goes away, and we disappear back into nothingness again, and that's the end. And to think in those terms is first and foremost what made me come out of doubt, because I just find that extremely difficult to believe. I'm not starting this thing with, you may think I'm a Catholic skeptic, I'm going to start with Thomas Aquinas' five arguments or whatever for God. They're great arguments, and many individuals I've seen put forth really excellent variations of that. Matt Fradd on his show does a great job with it. Father Gregory Pine, who's often a guest on his show and part of his show, has done some amazing teaching on that. There's a lot of great, you can go to a lot of sources to hear the 5 arguments of Aquinas. I'm not starting from that perspective. I'm starting from the perspective of what it would mean to not be a believer first. The mental, emotional, psychological, the entire amount of that mental processing to think that that's what I live in. I live in an absolute cold and indifferent universe, that there's no meaning to life other than what I assign to it. And I'm going to have to look at everything in the world from that perspective. It does not mean that I can't be moral. I can't have moral convictions. As I said, I have atheist friends who are sometimes far more moral than religious friends. Have strong moral convictions, strong moral compass in their life. I know that you can have that inside of you. But in terms of the foundation for it, as I've heard some people say, it's like you have to borrow from of Christian or other religion believers' perspective in order to borrow from their worldview in order to hold that worldview. Because there is, it's chemicals. It's, as I said in the last video, brain fizz. My brain fizz talking to somebody else's brain fizz. What's the validation of it? And that I found incomprehensibly difficult to believe. How does one grasp that as the meaning or the source of what one holds to? I just find that very, very difficult to grasp or hold on to. That's all it's about. But if I was going to be true to an atheist conviction, then I'd have to say that's what it is. We're just a species that somehow emerged with powers of reason and that operating in our brain. We have to believe that matter produced mind. All right, the mind that now studies matter was produced by matter first. That somehow we came to consciousness. Which again, which if we ask any serious biologist out there, will say, well, we don't know. It's a mystery. Why do we have consciousness? Why do we have self-awareness? Why do we have imagination? We can talk about how it all works. We can talk again about all the neurotransmitters in our brain, all the ways that the thoughts are fired up. I heard one of my professors once made the reference to the Woody Allen quote about, it's not so much that I'm afraid of death, I just don't want to be there when it happens. And my professor was teaching, biological psychology and evolution, responding. He goes, well, technically, he says, if you understand the brain, you're really not going to be there when it happens because the brain will break down and all of those thoughts and emotions won't operate anymore. And so you, in a sense, won't be aware when you die. And, and that's fine. But do we really believe that that's where it all ends and that there's nothing beyond it? Do we discount all subjectivism? Do we discount our conscience, our sense of inside of us? We know, for example, that we, like many animals, have an instinct of survival, a self-surviving, an instinct to survive, a survival instinct, an instinct to self-preservation. Yet humans very, 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 very often in dangerous situations risk their life to save other people. They put themselves in direct danger to save, and this isn't always somebody they love. There was a case some years ago where an airliner went down in the Potomac River and it was very cold out. Anybody in the water for any length of time was going to get hypothermia. And one man coming out of the plane to help rescued as many people as he could. He kept staying in the water longer than he should have to pull people out. They weren't even relatives or friends. They were just strangers, but saving their life, acting in this honorable, amazing manner. And of course, they couldn't save him because he succumbed to the hypothermia and before he could get out of the water. Where does that come from? Where does that kind of courage come from? We think about heinous acts, wicked acts, evil actions, and that which is conducted by people who may be sociopathic or psychopathic. But what about these honorable actions, these amazing acts of love? And no, I don't attribute that necessarily because they believe in God many times, whether they did or they didn't, some people just have that kind of willingness to leap before they look and help someone in a situation like that. Where does that come from? Is that just a chemical thing? Is that just a mechanism in the brain? When people are willing to die for causes and principles and fight for things, we honor our men and women of the military and, especially the ones that gave their lives and the rest of their country. Is that just a defense mechanism, just some sort of brain thing, or is that real? Your awareness, people who believe they're spiritually sensitive and aware of things. Many people just attribute that to too much dopamine processing in the brain, and it could be that spiritual feelings are just dopamine. That's a reasonable possibility. But the fact that those feelings or experiences lead to courageous acts or tremendously loving acts or bring connection where people aren't there, those are very, very hard things to process and get just from an atheist perspective. What about the principles of conversation? The very thing that I'm doing right now, here and now, and hoping to have dialogue with you all as I do these particular videos. Logic, for example. Again, I think I asked it yesterday. What does logic smell like, or feel like, or look like? We know what it sounds like in terms of something that's logical. We recognize when there's a logical ordering of sentences, a coherent statement, or an understanding. But what is logic? Is logic merely a human construct? Just something that humans over time have constructed as a way of communicating with each other? Because logic isn't a material thing, specifically. You can argue that our thoughts are material things in the sense that, again, of neurotransmitters in the brain firing off. But logic itself. We need logic for anything we're doing, and you need to have normal conversations to function in society, to have a rational conversation. There must be logic, and it's generally an accepted or a given, but why does it even exist? What is it? Did we make it up, or is it real? Is it something that we can define as a part of objective reality? Compassion, kindness, caring, the care that, and granted there should be more, but the care that we give to the sick, to the dying, to the disabled, to those with developmental issues, the amount of money that is spent and action that is taken to help people in these situations is staggering sometimes, and drains on the economy. Now, I believe those things should be done because I believe every life is sacred, that every human being is created in the image of God, that are an image bearer of God, that they are someone, and I do not mean, as I've said, it's not a reference to the physical appearance of a human being or one way or another. It has nothing to do with the physical. It's the image in the sense that we have things like will, independent will, and choice, and we have intellect, and we have understanding and thinking. I believe those are images, those are aspects of the images of God. Our imagination, our consciousness. I mean, other animals have that. My cat, not my current cat, we had a cat before that, gentlest, loving creature you'd ever want to meet. It's just so sweet and purrs and just so gentle. But I remember one day in the summer hearing this faint, quiet animal scream out in the yard. It's this scream, what is that noise? And going outside and seeing my cat having a baby rabbit cornered. And the cat, who's still a predatory animal, is ready to pounce on this baby rabbit and kill this baby rabbit. Now, my cat doesn't have a conscience. Although my cat's gentle and loving and loves us, the cat has no conscience. And when he saw this rabbit, to him there was nothing more than, this is prey. This is the instincts of, this is prey and I'm a predator, and taking it over. As humans, we're looking at that with all this emotion, like it's a baby rabbit, oh my, and just reacting to this thing. And I pulled my cat away from it, rescued the rabbit, so to speak. But the rabbit didn't even want to move. The rabbit didn't move. An hour later, the rabbit was still there. My cat went back in the yard. He probably still taking him out. But you realize that these aren't just instincts, because I know there's a lot of arguments being made today, and Sam Harris has produced some. Michael Shermer's got a book, I think it's called The Moral Arc, that talks about it. And just trying to argue that morality is just a matter of the evolutionary process, that human beings, because they evolve in communities and that morals and caring for one another is a part of, and there's certainly, some evidence of that. I don't deny that, but are the morals and principles we stand for, especially principles, are they just that? Because let's face it, we've had cultures in our society. I think of ancient Sparta, where it's survival of the fittest. The weak die, the strong live. That's the mindset. And there are possibilities, of course. If there's no God and there's no reality beyond just our physical thing, where we might say, well, that might work better. I mean, there's a TV show, and I can't remember what it's on, but I think it's called The Man in the High Castle, and it gives you one of those alternate history deals where, in this case, the Nazis won World War II and they're running America, and it's set in the 60s or whatever, and there's a Gestapo guy on there, one of the characters, who has a family and kids, but he's this cruel bastard, this vicious guy, and just trying to hunt any rebellion or any dissidents from the order, until he finds out that his son has been diagnosed with a debilitating, crippling disease. And you find out that in their society, where the Nazis rule, there's no treatment. They don't even try. You're considered unfit, a non-productive eater. They euthanize them immediately. That's the goal. And he's trying to hide from the government that he serves this information so that they won't do that. And we say, well, that's sick, that's horrible. But let's face it, if you did that from a purely economic standard, we took all of the nursing homes, all of the care facilities, group homes, everything where there's people, if those people were all just exterminated, eliminated, we might have a booming economy right now. But again, horrifying to think of, because we don't believe in cruelty. Most of us have compassion in our hearts, and we wouldn't want cruelty or murder or anything done to anyone. But where do those things come from? Are those just instincts? It can be argued in a lot of different ways. People who believe in freedom, personal autonomy and freedom, again, not so soldiers who fight for freedom, people who argue for freedom, believe in their personal freedom, people who believe in choice and freedom. B.F. Skinner, who was one of the pioneers of behavioral psychology, B.F. Skinner, I saw him in interviews when I was a kid where he'd say, freedom's an illusion, dude. Freedom's not even real. Freedom is just an illusion. And he taught operant conditioning. He said the best course for humans is to be conditioned to find out that their talents and areas, condition them to want to do those things, and don't give them any choices about anything. That was his dream society, from what I've read, the stuff that he's written. And again, the various atheistic philosophies that have been birthed through the years. If it's Marxism, then it's everything in the world is all about class struggle. It's all about class struggle. A Freudian concept, a psychodynamic concept. It's everything in our life is motivated by unconscious desires pulling and pushing against the super ego of society, and somewhere in that we have to find some balance between these two things, but none of them really have any objective meaning. It's just a matter of trying to live better. On a practical world, any of us would think, yeah, kindness is better than cruelty, especially if we're going to be the victim. We don't want to be, but are those things arbitrarily just human constructs or emergent things from a blind evolutionary process, or are they endowed by us from our Creator? What do we believe in? I do believe in God, one God, the Creator of heaven and earth, the things visible and invisible, as the creed state. I believe that. I believe there's one God, and I believe that God put certain things in us. I believe as we study history and we study anthropology and look at all kinds of human cultures, there's always a tendency to believe in the spiritual things. It is really not just, and I don't believe that can be dismissed as well as because they didn't have technology. We have tons of technology today, and we still have millions of people who believe in God. Tons of technology. But the more deeply you understand the vastness of the universe or the complexity of this, the more awestruck I am by it. And it brings me to a sense of looking at a creator, not just the creation, that there is a creator behind the creation. Cultures, philosophy. You can look in every kind of different philosophical systems. The ancient Stoics in Greece. You can look at the mythology of and compare the mythology of. I remember doing a mythology class it was an undergraduate in college, and just being awestruck by the fact that you could study the mythology of India, the mythology of Egypt, the mythology of Greece, the mythology of Rome, and find stories that matched up very similarly, even though there was never a connection between these people to pass them on. Identical stories. Stories of redemption, stories of courage, stories of integrity. Always the morals of the stories were on the side of honesty, integrity, courage, tenacity, hard work, willingness to overcome things, punishment for evil, reward for good. These principles are so ingrained in the human what Carl Jung would have called the collective unconscious that's inside of our thinking. I think there's a great validity to that. The only thing with me is I don't think it's something that just developed in a blind mechanical process. I think there was a process. I don't deny the process. I don't deny the scientific reality of the process, but I think there's something behind that. I think and that's one of the things that makes me believe in God. The uniqueness of individual personalities, the uniqueness of talents and abilities. Also other strange things. Like, for example, in most people, the exception being sociopaths or psychopaths, but most people whose brains are functioning properly, we have a technology that was displayed a lot in the fictional TV series Lie to Me, but it's something that's definitely taught in college and both undergraduate and graduate levels are micro expressions, things like micro expressions. There is a human lie detector factor in an average person that there's reactions. Our eyebrows go up when we're surprised. A fake smile and a real smile, a fake smile, just the mouth smiling without the eyes, the mark of contempt when the upper lip turns upward or whatever, something you can't hide. Many people involved with marriage counseling said that the most dangerous thing they look for when they're counseling a couple is if you see contempt. It's like, man, if there's contempt between a husband and wife, that marriage has a good chance of being over. Disgust, certain reactions in the body. Why do our bodies have reactions to things that are morally there? Like a lie, for example. When you tell a lie, there are tells and giveaways all the time. Why? Why is honesty built into the system of our body? Is it just something that evolved on its own, or is it possible that a conscious and awareness of right and wrong is inside of human beings? I personally believe put there by God. I think these are more evidences of the existence of God and of, yes, a good God, a benevolent God, than we can imagine. Now, again, the common counter to that that's always being brought forth is again, well, then why is the world such an ugly place? And why are there horrible things happening? How come there've been babies born with their organs on the outside, or horrendous diseases and sicknesses that children develop, or natural disasters that wipe out tons and tons of seemingly innocent people? And again, those are moral arguments. And I can say at the offset, I can't answer that question. I don't know why certain sufferings are allowed. I can't. I don't. It's beyond my comprehension. But I'm not willing to dismiss the existence of God and of a good God because of that. The popular argument that's being touted a lot today is the one where, well, if God is all good, he's not all powerful. And if he's all powerful, he's not all good. Where does that come from? I'll tell you exactly what it comes from. Hubris. Human hubris. Arrogance. Pride. The presumption is that if God is a good God, but yet he allows these things, or causes or allows, however you want to come down on that theologically, then he couldn't possibly be good. But the thing is, there are lots of things we don't understand that later on we gain understanding too. For example, in your lives, many of our lives, some of us can recount maybe awful things we went through, terrible things that were so difficult to go through at the time, very trying, very emotionally draining. But we can look back on the other side and say, but yeah, I learned this from that, I learned that from that. I became a more compassionate person, a more sensitive person, a more loving person because of that. Suffering is a good school for compassion and love. Show me a person who's never suffered much, I'll show you very often a person who's never loved much. Does it have to be that way? No. Should it have to be that way? Of course not. But the point is, it's this recognition of the fact that these things matter. But they matter because they're things that are real. They matter because something like honesty, things like honesty, integrity, loyalty, compassion, kindness, denial of self, helping someone else, putting someone else before you, things like that aren't just simply my personal ideas, and then maybe somebody else says, no, I prefer selfishness and greed. And no, it's the idea that these are characteristics and qualities that we should want to cultivate because they're right. And again, none of that has anything to do with the punishment reward argument. A go-to argument that many times some of my atheist friends have used is the old, well, you have to have somebody to punish you or reward you in order to do good, whereas I just do good because it's the right thing to do. That's more the issue to me, not the punishment or reward. It's is it the right thing? Why is it the right thing to do? Why? Star Trek postulated in the original series, the Klingons became more people of honor in the Next Generation, some of the later editions of Star Trek. But if you ever watch the original series of Star Trek, the Klingons would make statements like, a character who's a member of the Klingon race would say, well, we Klingons believe that the sick die, only the strong should live. And that was their mindset. Well, you could save on a lot of resources if we held that view. And there is a certain precedent for that, even in some elements in nature. Ever watch the Disney nature documentary on monkeys? Amazing when they watch the monkey characteristics on and I forget the nation they were in where they were doing it, but how much bullying and grappling for position in these monkey communities as one pushes for dominance over another, and there's cruelty to lower ones. There are these, you see these things in the animal community. All right, that's nature's course. The Lion King never showed Simba learning how to rip the throat out of a gazelle. All right, most cartoons that when Bambi's mother died, they didn't actually show it on camera. As far as the animation went, they didn't try to portray it. It's like we love to think of nature as this wonderful realm, and yet the nature is a wildly dangerous and scary place. And it was simply our developing the power of reason to simply, by some random compilation of forces that caused us to say we can there's a better way of love or compassion, or is it there a God who put in our hearts love and compassion is the way? These are reasons to believe in God. I think these are more compelling than many of the quote standard arguments. The realization of what we know inside of ourselves, the uniqueness of us as human beings, the from our individual fingerprints to our individual DNA. I marvel, for example, at human voices. You occasionally hear a voice here and there that sounds similar, but voices are so unique. And I think of every person that I've met over the years, and people that I know now, and people who are co-workers at my job, or people in my family, everybody's got their own unique voice, their own unique laugh. There's always this incredible amount of insane individuality in the species. of humans. I think that's amazing. And and the creativity, the wonder of it, the amazingness. I remember, George Carlin used to make fun of the notion of the human beings who make silly putty and napalm, and humans are capable of these horrendously evil, destructive things, and then these something like silly putty that's so silly, and I grant the humor of it, but I always again am awestruck by, beauty and art and design and music and things that have such amazing rhythms, none of which have a practical element in terms of food, clothing, and shelter, food, water, clothing, and shelter, like base needs or whatever. But they're a matter of great necessity in human life. When we see something, and this is an old debate that's been around, but when we see something that looks sublime and amazing in nature, is it sublime and amazing, or is it that's just what we project onto it? I disagree. I think we see it, and that's why we project onto it. Studies have been made concerning attempts at artificial intelligence, and development of robots, and things of that nature, and they said that one of the difficulties we have with why we don't have really good androids and robots that are running around to the level that we like is because all of the ways our brains operate, that we as human beings see meaning. We see meaning first, and then we apply to it. We don't see the thing and then apply the meaning. We see the meaning. A little child learns that a doorknob turns a door and it opens. And that becomes instilled in us as the way to get through a door. And that's why it's very easy for the transmissions to be sent to our limbs for a healthy human being to open and close a door. We see meaning in things before we see the object. It's really kind of just the opposite of what is often been believed, is no, we have to project meaning. No, we don't project meanings onto it. We see meanings. Human beings in the course of human evolution, human beings have greater attraction to symmetrical than asymmetrical in terms of human shapes. There's the reason that a person is attracted to someone else based on beauty or appearance is because we're more attracted to the symmetrical than the asymmetrical. We're attracted to things that have balance and structure to them, and in terms of our fellow human beings in sexual attraction, or in terms of just the things we like. We're attracted to symmetrical things and to things that have order and structure and design and architecture and beauty. Things like Chartres Cathedral or something, this amazing piece of architecture, whether you believe in God or not, this outstanding piece of architecture that you can look at and see all of the beauty and artwork that went into it, and all the time that it took to build it. These things are inside of us as human beings. Are they just chemical reactions, or is it reality? These are some of the reasons that I believe in God. These are one of the reasons that I came out of a sense of non-Gnostic, as I said, rather than agnostic, notions of not knowing. These things are, there's a realness and a passion to that. To believe that we are, again, for me sounding patriotic, but I think of the words of the Declaration of Independence. We're endowed with our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think we are endowed with those things. I think our desire to pursue happiness, to have liberty and freedom of choice, to freedom of movement, things like that, is something that's built inside of us by God, and part of what we are. I think that there's objective, real meaning to that, not simply a meaning that we create to it. That life is more than just the biological preservation of life, it's the quality of life as well. And I think these things come from something more. And I think these are actually more evidences of God. I think when you flip it the other way, it's such a bleak thought. To go to sleep every night and get up every morning believing that I live in a cold, dark, and different universe, that there is no help beyond what I can see and observe, that the people I love, the principles I believe in, the things that I would stand for, are just simply, again, human constructs or emergent biological factors that don't have anything beyond that. I think that the tapestry of life is such that even though there are many horrors and things we have to face, and that's another video, we'll talk more about why is evil in the world, things like that, the classic question. But just for understanding the good that's in human beings and the good that we pursue and look for, there's meaning behind that. Tremendous meaning behind it. And I think to try and hold a worldview where you discount that is very, very illogical. Like I said, I've seen atheists and agnostics argue with passion about principles that I would agree with them on, certain principles and ideas, and yet sometimes I've asked them point blank afterwards, but why do you believe that? Do you really just believe that's just something you made up? that I made up 2 and we both made it up together, or different ones of us had, and it's a kind of a nice way to go with things? Or is there something real beyond this that establishes that? Is there ultimate good? Think of the word progressive. When you hear the word progressive in any context, to progress in something is to go towards something, to move closer to the actual thing. You can't progress, politically. Sometimes people say they're progressives because they want a better society or better things, and that's fine, but what is the goal? Is there a standard by which you're progressing? Because to progress or to regress means you're moving toward or against something. From a Christian theological perspective, from a Catholic Christian perspective, God is ultimate beauty and truth and goodness. He's the ultimate good, and the standard of pure goodness is something we'd want to aim for. The ultimate beauty, in Christian theology, to behold the beatific vision, to see God, to see Him fully, and to be in His presence is, the ultimate beauty. What is ultimate truth, ultimate reality? I mean, there needs to be a standard by which you aim at. I mean, if you had an art class where art students were being told to copy a great work of art, but you changed out the painting every day while they were working on it. One day it was one artist, one day it was another artist, one day it was one painting. You would never get anywhere. You couldn't progress toward it. But if you were aiming toward copying that ideal, that would make sense. But to say I'm progressing toward something where there's no meaning in it at all doesn't make sense to me. And I think that these are things that are worthwhile to examine and question in life. Now, technologically, we know progress is better. Build a better mousetrap. Let's have more luxury, more access to information, better transportation, better communication. In technology, it's not hard to see at all. But in any other avenue, there has to be a standard. How do we progress toward greater goodness? How do we progress toward greater compassion? How do we progress toward more integrity in our lives, more honor, more truthfulness, honesty? There's a standard. All of us kind of know what that standard is. Kind of Plato's actual, old argument that the old Platonic arguments of, in nature there is no perfect circle or no perfect square, and yet we all know what that is. We know when something's level or not level. We know almost on an instinctual level if something is perfectly spherical or if it's distorted. And yet we don't. And yet all the examples we have of these things are usually man-made. But yet inside of us there's an innate awareness of this. Did we invent it? Are all the geometrical shapes human inventions entirely? Or were they inside of us that we could recognize as we saw them and got closer to them? It's an interesting question. And if so, where'd it come from? Why is it there? Is our mind a tabula rasa, blank slate? Or is there something intuitively in our mind that tells us when something is moving toward something better, or something worse, something good, or something, when we see, something that's beautiful, we're attracted more to something that's beautiful, and we sort of repel towards something ugly. Is that just because we've been taught that's ugly or that's beautiful, or is it because there is an innate reality in these things? And if there is, where did it come from? Is our minds a matter of what used to be called free thought, think whatever we want, or is our mind thinking toward the best, the ultimate, the right, and the view of that things? Those are questions, and those are evidences, and I think those are our values, and that's some of why I came to believe in God, is understanding those truths. So examine some of these things we've talked about right now. So take some time with it. Again, ask questions in the comments, challenges, anything you like, and we'll get into more reasons and other elements of this in the next video. But until then, it's been great talking to you all, and I hope we'll see you all next time. Thank you.